we'll continue with beer-driven development now, but from a different perspective, slightly different, more turned to developers than to clients and business people. And when talking about software development in general, I want now to focus on software quality. And let's try to see how do we measure software quality, what is software quality, what kind of software qualities there are. I guess everyone of you have some opinion about what is high quality software and how do you define it, but in general, we can divide it into two kinds of quality. It's external and internal quality. And external quality is what matters most to your customer. Your customer does not care about your source code or your classes, functions, whatever do you use. They care about features, about performance, the stuff that they see when they use the software. Okay? So this is the external quality. And that was what my previous talk was about when we were writing scenarios and running them. We were focused mainly on the external quality of our application. And in this talk, we'll focus on internal quality. And again, we can speak about various criteria here, but the main quality when we're talking about the source code is the actual maintainability of the source code. How hard it is to add new features, how hard it is to evolve and iterate when you're working on your source code. So here's the image that represents the usual flow from the beginning of the development of your application. The red line represents the number of features we're adding to the application without taking care about the internal quality. So if you don't care about the internal quality of your application, you will be able to start fast. You will be adding, initially, you will be adding features very fast, but as time goes, it will become harder and harder to add new features to your application. After a few months of development, your client comes and say, okay, we need to add a new checkbox here, and you say, okay, we need 2 days to do this. And he'll probably say, if he's not a developer, why do you need 2 days to add a single checkbox? Well, we need to refactor. And he will say, what is refactoring? And then you'll get fired. Or you say, in the worst case, we need to do a rewrite. Why? Because you didn't care about the quality of your source code. On the other hand, if you care about the quality, initially you will develop, and there will be nothing to show to your client. Okay, just a blank page. Because you are developing the architecture. Because you know that after some time you will need to add new features and your code base must be flexible to adopt these changes. But as time goes, if you have a good architecture because you care about your software, it will be easier to add new features and you will be able to iterate faster. All the speakers today talked about this cycle. The usual TDD development cycle consists of these 3 stages. So you write a test for your code, then you write a minimum amount of code to satisfy these tests, and then you run your tests until they get green, and you then refactor, and again, adding new test cases and improving your code by refactoring. And this stage, when you're refactoring, is actually where all the magic happens, where all the good things happen. You're improving here. And we will focus today on refactoring. So what is actually refactoring? By definition, it's a process of changing your source code without changing its external behavior. So you're improving your code base, but the external behavior, the APIs you defined, stays unchanged. They are backward compatible. if you find a method with a bad name, you just rename it, but if it's private method, for example, you rename it, you remove some unnecessary statement, you extract some classes into several classes, but the external behavior of your application or the library or whatever software you're building will stay unchanged. Let's see what are the difference, because SpecBDD is actually the methodology that is derived from TDD, and let's see what are the actual differences in the vocabulary when we are talking about behavior-driven development. In test-driven development, there are tests, okay? We all know tests, we all write them, but in SpecBDD, we are not testing, we are writing a specification for a source code. So it will put you in a slightly different mindset when you are not writing your code, but you're actually writing a specification of how your code should behave. In previous talk, we tried to describe the application behavior, the external application behavior. So we said, okay, I click there, I fill in this field, and I submit the form, and I should see this. But in SpecBDD, we are not describing the application behavior, but the actual code behavior. We will describe how our class is instantiated, what are the dependencies, what methods we have, how do we call them, what the result we expect, and things like that. In test-driven development, we have test method. In SpecBDD, we have examples. So it will be the examples of using the code we are about to write. In TDD, we are asserting the results. In SpecBDD, we are not asserting, we are expecting. We write expectation, we expect how our code should behave. Practically, TDD and BDD are the same kind of stuff, more or less, but they use a different language. And here's the example. Here's the PHP unit language. So when we are asserting with PHP unit, we are writing this assert equals 0 result. So we are asserting that the result is equal to 0. And the same example in PHP spec is result should be 0. Okay, so you see that the language we are using is similar to the human readable language. So if you read it like the English sentence, result should be 0, it's more natural, right? That was the idea behind PHP spec. To design the tool that will allow me to write specification in a more natural way. But when we focus on actual tools, it's not only about the language. And here's the example when using PHP unit. So the right thing to do is to write tests before writing the actual code, right? And here I wrote a command test, and I run it, and suddenly I get a PHP fatal error saying that command is not found. So I'm doing the natural workflow, and I'm getting a fatal error. So this is not what I expect from my workflow. I don't know why Sebastian is looking at his screen. I was hoping you will not be in the room when I present this. Okay, we'll see how we do it in PHP spec, and you will decide what you like the most. And another problem I found with PHP unit is it's really hard to mock your dependencies. You will need to write significant amount of code in order to mock something, and we'll see that in PHP spec it should be a lot easier to do that. So what I want is a tool that will not stand in my way, will not throw errors at me, but will try to help me to make my workflow easier, and I want to have fun when I write the code. I don't want this kind of problems. Yes, I want my tool to stand in my way and say, you are doing things wrong, but it should do it only when I miss the design. So when I really do something wrong, when I'm writing tests before the code, I didn't do anything wrong, so I expect it to help me. And this is the definition taken from the PHP spec website. So the PHP is also a command line interface tool, also initially sponsored by KMP Labs, and development is still under heavy development. Version 2.0 is released, and you can find more information on phpspec.net website. But instead of talking too much, I will just jump into the command line and show you how it actually works. So here I have the simple empty application with just installed PHP spec 2.0 inside my project. And I should not have, I'll remove all the source code. Okay, so it's empty. The first thing I will do is I will run the PHP spec. And PHP spec provides two commands, and that's all that you will need for working with this tool. First command is run. It just runs your specification that are by default stored inside your spec directory. And the second command is the describe command that creates a specification for a class. So in order to start, I will just describe my first object. So I will say PHP spec describe, and I will say, let's say it's tday object. So I'm saying I want to describe tday object. And the tool creates a new file for me. It's created the tday spec. I will open it now. You see it's inside spec directory. And it's just a regular PHP class which extends object behavior object. And you will notice several strange things about this class. The first strange things is that catches your eye probably is this underscored method. You usually use camel case, right? The reason why PHP spec is using this notation is it's easier to read. When you write it like human, because these are the usage examples, and the method name is actually a human readable language sentence that tries to describe the example of using the code. And we'll write a new example just in a minute. So this is the first weird thing, and the reason is just the readability, nothing more. And the second thing is that there is no visibility, no public, private, or whatever in front of this function keyword. That's because this is not a real method, it's just a user example, so we don't need that. So it is just a convention. You don't need to do it this way, but that's how we usually do it. It's a recommended way. That's enough for now. So we have auto-generated the spec class. We didn't write any code yet. I'll just go back to the terminal and execute php spec run command and see what happens. Okay, it tries to run my specification, but there is a problem because I didn't write my class yet. I just wrote specification, so PHP spec is so nice and it offers me to create this class for me. And I will say yes, of course. And it created a class for me. Let's open and see what is inside. Okay, nothing special to see, just a plain PHP object, nothing more. And if I run it again, I will have one example that is auto-generated, which is passed. So this example. Okay, so you see, I just created the empty class, empty specification, so let's try specifying our object. Let's say that this tday object, I'm adding new example. Function, it is fun. Okay, tday should be fun. And I will expect that is fun, say should be fun. Okay? Thanks. So this is the simple example. The name of the example is it is fun, and I'm expecting it to be fun. And when I run it, PHP spec again tries to help me, and it assumes that I wanted isFun method and offers me to create one. So I will say yes, of course, create it for me. And it is auto-generated again. Yeah. But now if I run it again, yeah, I will actually need to write some code. If I run it again, it fails because this isFun method is not implemented yet and it returns null. So I can just go and write a minimum amount of code to satisfy this specification. And minimum amount of code is returned true. And as you see, the BDD, the spec BDD workflow is, I'm writing the example and I'm writing the minimum amount of code to satisfy it. So I'm doing a smallest bit of change that I need in order to satisfy my specification. This is really important because when you're doing it like this, you're making less chance to make to create a bug, to introduce an issue, because your change set is really small. And when you're developing and you sit down and code for 2 hours working on some feature, there is a really, really big possibility that you will do something wrong. But when you do in these small chunks, in small increments, then there is a less chance to make a bug. And you're specifying. So now when I run it, it says there are 2 examples passed. There's interesting option. If you open a help for run method, you will see that there are several formats available. There is a format parameter. And if I format it like this, with pretty formatter, it will actually render this example as sentences. And again, like in previous talk with Beckett, because Beckett scenarios serve as a documentation for the software, specification also can serve as a documentation, because when you look at this generated sentences and you read them, because they're human readable language, you will get the idea what tday object is and how it behaves and what it does. And it's cool for your teammates because they can read the output of the PHP spec run command and get introduced to the code base like this. This is one of the benefits. Okay, I have a few more minutes to show you, to play more with PHP spec, because the real power of PHP spec is about mocking other objects. So let's make some advanced example with tday is fun if there is beer. Okay? Makes sense. And then I say I need beer, okay. I pretend that I have a beer object and say that this, and when I'm saying this inside my spec, I'm not referring to the spec object itself, but I'm referring to the object I'm specifying. So this does not refer to tday spec, but it refers to tday object. So I say tday be constructed with beer. Okay. Let me just add here a use statement for beer. So I said it should be fun if it is constructed with beer. Okay? So I'm running again, and it says that class beer does not exist, so I will just describe it. Describe beer. Okay, the beer is created. Now I run again, and it says that there is no constructor, right? There is no beer class. I create a beer class, run again, and it says that tday does not have a constructor. Yes, create me a constructor. You see, this is really handy, right? This code generator. Okay, and now it fails because this missed the argument. So let's fix this. So in tday, I have constructor generated, but by code generator. By the way, these code generator templates can be customized, so you can add all your own templates to match your coding standards. So I will say beer. I will allow null. I will create private beer and just assign there. Okay, and when I run again, it works, right? But it works because of the use case. So I will add one example to make it fail. I'm again doing this workflow. So if I don't construct with the beer, I say it is not fun if there is no beer. And I will delete beer in this example. And I will change expectation to should not be fun. Okay? So I just added a new example to cover my code because I know it will fail because this isFun method is really dumb and it needs to be improved. And yes, it fails because isFun returns true and it should return false. So I will add a simple fix where I will assure that beer is not null. Okay? That's how it should work. So I run again, and I'm all set. So as you can see, this is really, really basic example, but what you should learn from this example is that it's really easy to get mock object because this is not, wrong code. This beer object, I am just telling PHP spec to give me the mock for this beer object, and it will give me a dummy object that will act as a beer, and then I can also define how this beer object should behave if I have some more advanced specification case. But it's interesting to have it as easy as this. And the other thing is that this object refers to the actual object I'm about to write. So I encourage you to go and play with the tool. I didn't show you can do various stuff like expecting exception to be thrown in some cases, or some result being of a certain type, and stuff like that. So there are different type of matchers available. So you can find, I tweeted the slides, you can find them and see the definition for each matcher that you can use inside your specs, and also some other useful things. But as you can see, the idea is to use the language to write the specification as a PHP code, but the language is actually human readable. The identity, the comparison matcher, here's the throw method. So in some case, I'm expecting exception to be thrown. So I said, this should throw this type of exception during this method if I call it with these parameters. The type matcher ensures that you have a result of certain type. Object states, we use this one. When you say should have, PHP spec assumes that you want method that starts with is or has or stuff like that. Count matcher for countable interface and arrays, for scalar for checking the types, and so on and so on. And if any of these matchers doesn't satisfy your needs, you can go with inline matcher when you actually return a callback that will actually assert your expectations.